Everything was fine until I stepped outside and saw the concrete right in the middle of my ranch yard. No warning, no permission. Just gray, wet cement poured across the only access road to my barn. And who did it? The HO, the same people who weren't even supposed to have authority over my land. But that's when I knew. If they wanted to play dirty, I could pour concrete too. Except this time, it was going to block them. And that was just the beginning. Let me set the scene. I own a ranch just outside a quiet suburban neighborhood. It's been in my family for generations. The land borders a modern housing development with a private HOA, but technically, my property is not part of their jurisdiction. There's a dusty gravel road that runs across the corner of my land, which the HOA occasionally uses for emergency vehicles or contractors. I'd always allowed it as a courtesy. No formal agreement, just neighborly goodwill. But things started getting weird when the HOA changed leadership. A new president took over, real power-hungry guy named Craig, one of those clipboard-wielding types who thinks every mailbox should be regulation height. Craig didn't like that I had free reign over my land. He said my fencing was unsightly, that my barn was non-conforming. I reminded him nicely that I wasn't under their authority, but it only made him more aggressive. Then came the letters. At first, they were just passive-aggressive. Notes suggesting I upgrade my barn paint color to match the neighborhood palette. Then actual fines started arriving. $500 here, $1,000 there. All of them referencing violations I wasn't even subject to. I ignored them. Then, one morning, I went out to check on my horses and saw it. Wet concrete poured across the private access road leading through my ranch to the barn. A 6-inch thick slab. No warning, no explanation. Just there. I was speechless. I thought it might have been a mistake. Maybe utility work? Maybe someone got confused? Nope. I confronted Craig at the next HOA meeting, and I recorded it. He smirked and said, "We've decided to formalize that access route. For community benefit." Community benefit? This was my land, mine. He claimed that since the HOA had used the road over the years, it was now subject to prescriptive easement. In other words, they thought they had the legal right to it, because they'd used it long enough. That's when I stopped playing nice. I went straight to the county recorder's office, pulled property records, checked easement agreements, spoke to a land attorney, and the truth was clear. They had no legal claim. Not even close. So I made a decision. If the HOA was going to block my road with concrete, then I was going to trap them on their side. I hired a crew the very next day. Not the cheapest job, but worth every penny. We brought in barriers, massive concrete blocks, and placed them at the only point where the AO's neighborhood road met my private property. The same road they used for work trucks, deliveries, and landscape crews. And I made sure to pour a fresh layer of concrete under the barriers, embedding them deep into the dirt. No quick removal. If they wanted access, they'd need a crane. And I added a sign, "Private property access revoked." Until further notice. Within 24 hours, I got a knock on the door. Craig, furious, red-faced, fuming, sighed. I was endangering public infrastructure. I laughed. Told him he could climb over the concrete if it was that important. Then came the emails, demands, threats, legal letters, most of them empty bluffs. But then it escalated. 3 days later, I woke up to the sound of engines. Looked out the window, and there it was. A crane. An actual crane lifting the barriers out of place. HOA workers on my land moving equipment without permission. I called the sheriff. Trespassing. Property interference. Unauthorized construction. I had the whole thing recorded on my trail cam. The sheriff told the HOA to leave immediately and warned them not to return. But they'd already crossed the line. I decided it was time to take them to court. Not just for property damage, but for harassment, fraud, and illegal use of HOA funds. Because guess what? I just uncovered something big. While gathering evidence, I received an email from someone anonymous. Claimed to be a former HOA board member. Said they left because of Craig's shady leadership and they had proof. They weren't kidding. Attached were meeting minutes and internal documents showing that the HOA president had knowingly spent thousands in community funds to pour concrete on land they didn't own. He told the board it was in our easement rights, even after being warned by another member that they had no such authority. Worse, the funds had been pulled from the reserve budget, meant for streetlight repairs and sidewalk maintenance. Residents were paying for this battle and they had no idea. I shared the documents with my lawyer, and we filed a formal complaint with the state's HOA Oversight Board. Then I published a video. Not a rant, just facts. Footage of the concrete, the HOA's unauthorized actions, the whistleblower's documents, proof the land was legally mine. It went viral overnight. News stations called, neighbors rallied. Even people within the HOA started speaking up. Turns out this wasn't the first time Craig had overstepped his power. Someone mentioned he once fined a homeowner $200 for putting up a happy birthday sign without permission. People had had enough. An emergency HOA meeting was called, and for the first time ever, I was invited to speak. I showed up with receipts, literally. That final HOA meeting felt like a trial. Residents were angry. Some didn't even know about the road situation. Others had been misled into thinking I was trying to take community land. I explained everything from the illegal concrete to the misuse of HOA funds to the documents from the whistleblower. You could feel the mood shift. Craig tried to interrupt me, saying I was spreading misinformation. But then someone stood up and said, "If this is misinformation, then explain this." He held up a printed email Craig's own approval for the concrete project, dated weeks before it was ever discussed at a board meeting. Silence. People started shouting. One resident demanded a vote to remove Craig from the board immediately. Another asked to audit the HOA's finances. It was a meltdown. By the end of the night, Craig was voted out. The board was forced to halt all ongoing projects, and a legal investigation was underway. As for me, I won my lawsuit. The court ruled in my favor and ordered the HOA to pay for damages, legal fees, and to issue a public apology. They were also required to send a letter to every resident explaining the misuse of funds and Craig's removal. And my land? It's now legally documented with reinforced no-access protections. But the best part? That concrete slab they poured is still sitting there right where they left it, useless, forgotten, a symbol of everything they did wrong. And every time I walk by it, I smile. Because sometimes the best way to fight back isn't with anger, it's with concrete consequences. What started as a simple case of HOA overreach turned into a full-blown legal battle and a community wake-up call. They thought they could bully one homeowner. They thought they could claim land that wasn't theirs. They thought they could pour concrete and silence opposition. But they were wrong. With a paper trail, the truth, and a little concrete of my own, I stood my ground. And I won. The corrupt board was exposed. The HOA was forced to face real accountability. And my land? Still mine. Still protected. Let this story be a reminder. Know your rights. Question authority. And when they pour concrete on your land, make sure they're the ones who get stuck in it.